The champagne flutes clinked like tiny bells as I maneuvered through the crowd. My tray held high above the sea of sequined gowns and sharp-cut tuxedos. The Grand Meridian's ballroom shimmered under crystal chandeliers so massive they looked like frozen waterfalls of light. The air was thick with the scent of imported roses, Cuban cigars, and that unmistakable smell of old money. Leather, cologne, and arrogance mixed into something you could almost taste. Champagne, I offered to a man whose cufflinks probably cost more than my car. He didn't acknowledge me, just snatched a glass without breaking eye contact with his companion. I might as well have been a piece of furniture. Welcome to Story Lens TV, where every story pulls back the curtain on lives you never knew existed. I'm about to tell you mine. If you're watching from somewhere in the world right now, drop a comment and let me know where you're tuning in from. And if you want to hear how a single crayon changed everything, hit that like button and subscribe, because what happened next, I still can't quite believe it myself. 5 years. 5 years of serving Harbor City's elite had taught me the first rule of survival. Be invisible. My burgundy uniform, a fitted dress over a crisp white blouse, marked me as staff, which in their world meant I was scenery. My feet screamed in the regulation black heels, and we were barely 3 hours into the 6-hour Cancer Research Foundation gala. Ironic, considering half these people probably profited from things that caused cancer. But I'd taken the shift anyway. Rent was due in 4 days, and the electric company had already sent 2 warnings. My daughter Becca was at my neighbor's tonight, probably asleep on Mrs. Chen's couch with her worn purple blanket clutched in her fists. She was only 3, but she'd already learned not to ask why mommy worked so much. That thought always felt like swallowing glass. "Move," someone hissed, and I pivoted just in time to avoid a collision with a woman in a gown that cost more than my annual salary. She didn't apologize. They never did. That's when I saw him. The boy. He stood near the edge of the ballroom, beside a column wrapped in white silk and gold ribbon, perfectly still in a way that made him seem almost like a statue. While other children chased each other between tables, shrieking with laughter, he remained frozen, his small hands pressed flat against his sides. He wore a cobalt blue suit, tailored, expensive, immaculate, with a bow tie so perfectly straight it looked painful. His light brown hair was combed neatly to one side, and his face was completely blank. Not sad, not bored, just absent, like he'd gone somewhere far away and left his body standing there. He couldn't have been older than 5. I circled the room, delivering drinks, collecting empties, smiling my practiced smile. But every few minutes, my eyes found him again. A woman in pearls walked past him so close her dress brushed his shoulder. He didn't flinch. A waiter nearly knocked into him while balancing a tray. The boy didn't react. It was like he wasn't really there, or maybe like no one else could see him. "Alara, table 9 needs water, and don't forget the VIP section gets priority." Gavin Holt snapped as he passed, his clipboard clutched like a weapon. My supervisor had perfected the art of making people feel 2 inches tall. I nodded and kept moving, but something gnawed at me. The boy, his isolation, the way the room flowed around him like he was a ghost. Then the air in the ballroom changed. Conversations dimmed. Heads turned. Even the string quartet seemed to play a little softer. I looked toward the entrance and understood immediately. He didn't walk, he commanded. Every step deliberate, every movement calibrated. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair silvered at the temples and a salt and pepper beard that made him look distinguished and dangerous all at once. His charcoal tuxedo fit like it had been sewn directly onto his body, and his eyes, dark, cold, calculating, swept the room with the precision of a man who noticed everything and forgave nothing. Dmitry Koval. Even if you didn't know his name, you knew what he was. The way people straightened their spines. The way smiles became stiff and false. The way 2 men in dark suits flanked him, their jackets barely concealing the shape of holsters beneath. Harbor City's most dangerous man had arrived, and the entire room held its breath. I'd heard the stories, of course. Everyone had. Dmitry Koval, the Shadow King of Harbor City. The man who owned half the docks, a quarter of the police force, and more politicians than anyone cared to count. His business ventures were whispered about but never spoken aloud. Not if you wanted to wake up the next morning. He moved through the crowd like a shark through shallow water. People parted without him asking. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. A senator I'd seen on the news actually bowed slightly as Dmitri passed. But Dmitri's gaze didn't linger on any of them. He walked straight toward the boy in the cobalt blue suit. When he reached him, something impossible happened. The stone-cold expression cracked, just barely, just for a heartbeat, and something almost tender flickered across his face. He placed one large hand on the boy's shoulder, gentle, protective. He leaned down and said something quiet. The boy didn't look at him, didn't respond, but Dmitri didn't seem to expect him to. He straightened, murmured something to one of his guards, and turned back to the room, his expression hardening instantly. A woman in a silver gown approached him, all white teeth and eager eyes. She said something, gestured toward the boy, and laughed. A high, brittle sound that carried across the marble floor. Dmitri's face went perfectly still. The woman's smile died. She stammered something, her face going pale, and retreated so fast she nearly tripped over her own heels. I should have looked away. I had tables to serve, orders to follow, a paycheck I desperately needed. But I couldn't stop watching the boy, who stood exactly as he had before, unaware or uncaring of the storm that had just passed over him. For the next hour, the pattern repeated. Dmitri would circulate, shaking hands, nodding at conversations, radiating controlled menace. Every 10 minutes, he'd return to the boy, check on him silently, then leave again. And every single time, the boy remained alone, untouched, unseen. I was refilling wine glasses at a nearby table when I heard the whispers. That's Koval's son, the broken one. I heard he doesn't talk, not a single word. Genetic, probably. You know how those families are. Too much inbreeding, too many secrets. Poor Dmitri. Imagine building an empire and having that to pass it on to. The laughter that followed was soft, cruel, casual. My hand tightened around the wine bottle. I thought of Becca, of how fiercely I loved every inch of her, every quirk, every imperfection. I thought of how I would destroy anyone who spoke about her like she was defective. Before I could stop myself, I turned to them, my voice low and sharp. He's 5 years old. Maybe try remembering that. For sets of eyes turned to me, wide with shock, as if a lamp had just started talking. A man with a red face and a Rolex sputtered, "Excuse me?" I should have apologized, should have bowed my head and disappeared. Instead, I heard myself say, "Children aren't decorations. They're people. Maybe show some respect." I walked away before they could respond, my heart slamming against my ribs. Stupid. So stupid. Gavin was going to fire me. I just snapped at donors, at guests. I'd be lucky if I made it through the night. But then I looked at the boy again. He'd moved slightly, standing now in front of a long table draped in white linen. His small fingers hovered over the arrangement of place cards, silverware, and folded napkins. He didn't touch anything, just stared, his face expressionless, his body rigid. Other children ran past him, laughing. Parents danced with their sons and daughters under the chandeliers. And he stood there, alone, silent, invisible. Something cracked open in my chest. I glanced around. Dmitri was across the room, deep in conversation with men in expensive suits. Gavin was occupied near the kitchen doors. No one was watching. I walked over to the boy and knelt down, bringing myself to his eye level. Up close, I could see the tension in his small shoulders, the way his breathing was shallow and rapid, like he was holding himself together by sheer force of will. "Hi," I said softly. He didn't look at me. His eyes stayed fixed on the white napkin in front of him. I reached into the small pouch on my apron, the one where I kept my order pad, pens, and the pack of crayons I carried for Becca when I brought her to work on slow days. I pulled out a single crayon, red, bright, bold, impossible to ignore. I held it out between us, not forcing it into his hand, just offering. "Everyone says you don't talk," I whispered. "Maybe they just never gave you the right way to say what you're thinking." For a long, breathless moment, nothing happened. Then, Slowly, so slowly it felt like watching ice melt, the boy's hand moved. His fingers, small and careful, reached out. He took the crayon. The ballroom went silent. I didn't realize it at first. I was too focused on the boy, on the way his fingers curled around the crayon, on the way he stared at it like it was the first real thing he'd seen all night. But then I felt it. The weight of 100 stares. The absence of music, of conversation, of motion. I looked up. Every single person in the ballroom was watching us. Some with curiosity, some with horror, some with hands pressed over their mouths, like they were watching a car crash in slow motion. And directly across the floor, cutting through the crowd like a blade, was Dmitry Koval. His dark eyes locked onto mine. His expression was unreadable. No anger, no surprise, just a cold, calculating assessment that made my skin prickle with fear. One of his men leaned in to whisper something, but Dmitry silenced him with a single, slight movement of his hand. He didn't move, didn't speak, just watched. In that moment, kneeling on the marble floor with a crayon between me and a Mafia boss's silent son, I realized exactly what I'd done. I hadn't just crossed a line. I'd walked straight into the orbit of the most dangerous man in Harbor City. And I had no idea if I just saved myself or signed my own death warrant. Dmitry Koval didn't move. He just stood there on the far side of the dance floor, hands still resting on his son's shoulder, eyes locked on me like he was deciding whether I was a problem to be removed or a puzzle to be solved. My mouth went dry. Every instinct I had screamed at me to drop the crayon, apologize, and vanish into the safety of the service corridor. But Luca's fingers were still wrapped around that small stick of red wax, his knuckles pale with the effort of holding on to something unfamiliar and important. Running wasn't an option, not without ripping it out of his hand. The string quartet, God bless their suicidal professionalism, began playing again. Conversation started up in stuttering bursts, people pretending they hadn't just witnessed a waitress stick her head into the lion's mouth. The spell of silence broke, except between me and the man whose name could open doors or close coffins. Luca blinked once, then broke eye contact with the crayon to glance at the white napkin in front of him. I swallowed hard. "Do you like drawing?" I asked quietly. "You can put anything you want right here. It doesn't have to be perfect." He didn't answer, but he moved. Slowly, carefully, he set the tip of the crayon on the linen. His grip was awkward at first, like he wasn't used to this particular motion, but then something seemed to click. His wrist relaxed. His fingers adjusted. He began to draw. Not messy kid scribbles. Lines. Precise. Intentional. I watched, fascinated, as shapes emerged. A rectangle, then another, a series of vertical slashes that became window panes. A curved suggestion of chandeliers. Tiny dots that might be people. My heartbeat roared in my ears as I realized he was sketching the room around us from memory, compressing the chandeliered chaos into a clean, ordered map. Wow, I breathed. "You're really good at this." His face didn't change, but the pressure of his strokes softened, smoothed out. He added details, the pattern on the carpet, the placement of tables, even the heavy curtains in perfect miniature folds. "Luca." Dimitri's voice carried easily, even though he didn't raise it. It was magnetic, deep, tinged with an accent that turned the boy's name into something almost musical. "What are you doing?" Luca froze. For a terrifying second, he squeezed the crayon so hard the wax bent. Then, without lifting his head, he slid the napkin a fraction of an inch toward me, as if handing me a secret, and straightened his spine. "Drawing," he whispered. The single word was so soft I almost thought I imagined it. But Dmitry heard. His jaw shifted. The hand on his son's shoulder flexed, then stilled. Those dark eyes finally left my face and dropped to the napkin. He took one step closer, then another. I had the urge to back up, to give him space, to prove I wasn't a threat. But my knees were still on the polished floor, and something stubborn inside me refused to cower. I stayed exactly where I was. Dmitry came to a stop opposite me, forming a quiet, dangerous triangle between the three of us. Up close, the details that distance had blurred resolved. The threads of silver at his temples, the faint line of an old scar near his jaw, the almost imperceptible tension around his mouth. "Interesting," he said at last. "I did not know you liked crayons, cynic." Luca's fingers twitched against the napkin. He didn't look up. Cleared my throat. He's really talented. His sense of space, the details, most adults couldn't do this from memory. Dimitri's gaze slid back to me. "And you are an expert in drawing, Miss Ilara," I said, before common sense could stop me. "Ilara Voss. His eyes lingered on my name tag, then on my face again, as if comparing the cheap plastic to the person wearing it. "And tell me, Miss Voss, what made you decide to kneel in front of my son in a room full of people who know what happens to those who touch what is mine?" I probably should have lied. Claimed I didn't know who he was. Pretended it was all a misunderstanding. But Luca's small shoulders were bunched up around his ears like he was waiting to be struck by lightning. "I heard what they were saying about him," I said quietly. "And I didn't like it." Dimitri's expression didn't change, but something about the air shifted, like the room itself was listening. "Ah," he murmured. "So you came to defend him?" I shook my head. "I came to see him. There's a difference." For a moment we just stared at each other. My heart hammered so loud I was sure he could hear it. Then barely, fleetingly, the corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. More like the memory of one. "Finish your drawing, Luca," he said softly. "I will speak with Miss Voss later." He straightened, turning away, and the spell snapped. Conversations grew louder. Guests turned back to their wine, and the invisible machinery of the event groaned back into motion. I exhaled slowly, realizing I'd been holding my breath. "If you want another color," I murmured to Luca, "I've got a whole box." He didn't answer, but when I set 3 more crayons, blue, gold, and green, on the table beside the napkin, his hand drifted toward them like a compass finding north. If this moment in the ballroom already has you hooked, take a second to tap the like button. It seems small, but it tells the algorithm this is a story worth sharing with more people who love tense, emotional scenes like this. "Voss!" Gavin's hiss cut through the air like a whip. I jolted back to reality, scrambled to my feet, and nearly tripped over my own shoes. "Yes, sir?" I said, falling into step beside him as he stalked toward the kitchen. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" He snarled under his breath, careful to keep the fake smile plastered on for the guests. "Are you trying to get us all killed?" You were just fraternizing with the one person in this room every sane human being avoids." He shoved a tray of desserts into my hands harder than necessary. "Deliver. Smile. Don't look at Koval. Don't look at the boy. And if anyone asks, you don't know how to spell your own name. Understood." I bit back the response, burning my tongue, and nodded. Not because he was right, but because I couldn't afford to lose this job. Not with the rent overdue and Becca needing new shoes. The rest of the night blurred into a haze of plates and glasses and forced laughter. Still, my gaze kept drifting back to the far side of the ballroom, where Luca now sat at a small round table. The napkin was spread flat in front of him. The crayons I'd left lay in a tidy row, their tips worn but not broken. Every so often, Dimitri would return, standing behind his son like a dark, immovable pillar. He never interrupted, never corrected, just watched. Once, I saw his fingers brush the edge of the napkin, tracing a line Luca had drawn. The boy's shoulders relaxed a fraction at the touch. Hours later, when the last of the guests staggered toward the exit and the staff began clearing what felt like a battlefield of glass and glitter, I caught one final glimpse of them. Luca stood by the door, clutching the folded napkin in one hand like a treasure. Dimitri was speaking with one of his men. But when Luca turned to search the room with wide, searching eyes, Dimitri followed his gaze. He found me across the sea of empty tables, still in my stained burgundy uniform, hair frizzing from humidity and sweat. For a moment our eyes met. Dimitri inclined his head, just a fraction. A tiny nod that could have been acknowledgement, or warning, or both. Then they were gone. I didn't sleep much that night. When I finally collapsed into bed beside my snoring, blanket-tangled daughter, my feet throbbing and my brain buzzing. My last thought before exhaustion dragged me under was simple and terrifying. I had no idea what that small, red crayon had just set in motion. Morning at the harbor diner came with the gray light of exhaustion and the sour smell of old coffee. My uniform here was different, a plain navy polo and black jeans, but the job was the same. Be quick, be polite, be invisible. Morning, Elara, Mrs. Chun called from her usual booth, Becca's purple blanket folded neatly beside her. She was good last night. Didn't even wake up when you came to pick her up. I kissed my fingers and touched them to the blanket. A silent thank you. You're a lifesaver. The breakfast rush hit like a storm. Construction workers, nurses coming off night shifts. A few suits too cheap to eat at the Grand Meridian. Orders blurred together. 2 over easy, 1 waffle, extra syrup, coffee black, coffee with cream, coffee with whatever I had left to give. For almost an hour, I managed to convince myself the gala had been a bizarre dream. A glitch in my otherwise predictable, barely holding together life. Then the bell over the door chimed. Heads turned, not all of them, but enough. The diner was used to regulars, to people who belonged to this side of the city. The man who walked in did not belong anywhere near chipped laminate tables and laminated menus. He was big, not just tall but broad, with the kind of solidity that made the doorway feel too small around him. His dark hair was buzzed close on the sides, longer on top. A faint scar traced from his temple down across his cheek, stopping just shy of his jaw. He wore a navy suit that fit a little too perfectly to be off the rack and a white shirt with the top button undone. His eyes swept the room once, cataloging entrances, exits, everyone inside. When they landed on me, they stayed. Every instinct screamed danger. He crossed the room with measured steps, the faint clink of something metallic under his jacket punctuating each movement. He stopped at the edge of the counter where I stood gripping a coffee pot like a weapon. "Elara Voss?" he asked. His voice was smoother than I expected. Low, calm. My mouth went dry. "Who's asking?" "Rodek Thorne." He slid his hand into his jacket. My heart stuttered. For a split second, I actually considered ducking behind the counter. He pulled out an envelope. "Mr. Koval asked me to give you this." The world narrowed to the rectangle of cream-colored paper in his hand. Thick, high quality. My name, my full name, written across the front in precise black ink. I didn't take it. "I think you have the wrong person," I said, though we both knew I was lying. One eyebrow lifted slightly. "You offered his son a crayon last night." The coffee pot felt suddenly heavy. "Is he okay?" For the first time, Rodek's expression shifted. A flicker of something like surprise, almost respect. "He is fine," Rodek said. "Better than fine." He refused to let go of the napkin all night. Mr. Koval appreciated that. "Appreciated," I repeated faintly. "Right? Take it," Rodek said quietly, the word more gentle than an order should sound. "Please." The please did it. I set the pot down before my hand started shaking visibly and reached for the envelope. The paper was smooth and expensive under my fingers. "If this is some kind of joke." "Mr. Koval does not joke," Rodek said. "He requested you read it when you are alone." "I'm working," I managed. "My boss." "Your boss will understand." He glanced briefly toward the kitchen window. Gavin was staring at us, color draining from his face. "Or he won't. It does not matter." "Of course it matters," I snapped, panic pricking behind my eyes. "This job is replaceable," Rodek said. "You are not." The words landed like a foreign language. No one had ever said anything like that to me. Not and meant it. "If you need a break," Gavin called weakly from the pass. "Go ahead, Voss. Take 5, 10. Take whatever you need." He disappeared before I could see how much his hands were shaking. Rodek's eyes returned to me. "There is also a car waiting for you after your shift. Out front. You will be done here at 3, yes." My stomach nodded. "A car for what?" "To take you to Mr. Koval," he said simply. "He would like to speak with you. In person." I stared at him, at the envelope, at the reflection of my own pale face in the metal coffee pot. "I can't just Go meet a Mafia boss after work, I whispered. I have a daughter. I have. Arrangements have already been made, Rodek said, not unkindly. Your neighbor, Mrs. Chun, has agreed to keep Becca until 7. She will be compensated for her time. I felt suddenly unmoored, like the floor had dropped away and I was hanging in space. You talked to Mrs. Chun? This morning, he confirmed. She speaks very highly of you, and of your cooking. I swallowed around the lump in my throat. Of course she does. He studied my face for a moment, then inclined his head, a gesture oddly respectful. You have until 3 to decide, he said. The car will wait 15 minutes. After that, we will assume your answer is no. And if my answer is no? My voice was barely audible. Rodek's gaze didn't waver. Then we will not ask again. He turned and walked out, leaving the door chiming innocently behind him. For a long moment, I just stood there, envelope in hand, listening to the blood rush in my ears. Then I fled to the staff bathroom, locked the door, and slid down the wall until I was sitting on the cold tile. My name stared back at me in elegant black ink. I broke the seal with fingers that wouldn't stop trembling. Inside were 2 things, a folded sheet of stationery and a check. My vision blurred when I saw the number. $5,000. It might as well have been 5 million. 5,000 would clear every overdue bill, keep the lights on, buy Becca the winter coat I'd been eyeing in the thrift store window. 5,000 was the difference between treading water and finally being able to breathe. I forced myself to look at the letter. Miss Voss, your actions last night were unexpected. Very few people in my world do anything without considering what they stand to gain. You approached my son with nothing to gain and everything to lose. He has not stopped talking about the red since we returned home. For a child who does not speak, this is significant. I would like to discuss an arrangement that may be of benefit to us both. A car will be sent for you at 3 o'clock today. You have my word that you will come to no harm in my home. Sincerely, Dmitry Koval. P.S. Luca asked that I include this. Something small fell into my lap. A stub of red crayon, worn down but not broken. Wrapped around it was a scrap of paper torn from the napkin, now bearing a tiny, careful drawing of 3 stick figures under what could only be one of the Grand Meridian's chandeliers. 1 tall, 1 medium, 1 very small. The small one held a red line that extended toward the medium one. Toward me. If you're still with me at this point in the story, take a moment to subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Sometimes the smallest choices, a crayon, a conversation, a letter, are the ones that change everything, and there's a lot more ahead. I didn't decide so much as fail to refuse. By 3 o'clock, my brain was so overloaded with what-ifs and worst-case scenarios that when I stepped outside and saw the black sedan idling at the curb, I walked toward it like someone else was moving my feet. Rodek got out of the passenger seat and opened the back door. You came, he said. I laughed, a short, brittle sound. Apparently, if at any point you wish to leave Mr. Koval's residence, he said quietly, you will be taken home. No one will stop you. It sounded sincere. It also sounded like the kind of promise a man like Dmitry Koval only made when he was absolutely sure he wouldn't be refused. The car's interior smelled of leather and something expensive and unfamiliar. I perched on the edge of the seat, clutching my bag like a shield as we pulled away from the curb and merged into Harbor City's late afternoon traffic. We left my part of town quickly. The flickering neon, the cracked sidewalks, the laundry flapping from fire escapes. Glass and steel rose around us, then receded, replaced by tree-lined streets and houses with actual lawns. The further we drove, the more the city transformed from something I survived to something I'd only ever served from behind a tray. Finally, the sedan turned onto a long private drive flanked by stone pillars and wrought iron gates. Cameras tracked our approach. The gates swung open without a word. The Koval estate rose ahead like something out of a magazine and a nightmare at the same time. 3 stories of dark stone and glass perched on a cliff overlooking the bay. The setting sun painted the water gold behind it, giving the whole place a halo it absolutely did not deserve. At least that was what I told myself. Rodek opened my door, offering a steadying hand I pretended not to need. "Stay close to me," he said. "It can be overwhelming the first time." He wasn't wrong. Inside, the house was all marble floors, high ceilings, and art that probably cost more than my life. Hallways stretched in every direction. Men in suits moved quietly through them, earpieces visible, eyes sharp. It smelled faintly of cologne and lemon polish. And something else, wax and paper. The scent of crayons. Rodek led me through a series of rooms. A formal sitting room with antique furniture. A dining hall that could have seated 40. A glass-walled conservatory full of plants so green they almost hurt to look at. Finally, he stopped in front of a heavy wooden door. He knocked once. "Cody," a voice said from inside. "Come in." Rodek opened the door and gestured for me to enter. The study was unexpected. Yes, there was a massive desk, all dark wood and sleek edges, and floor-to-ceiling shelves lined with books. But one whole wall was taken up by a series of low cabinets and a broad table scattered with paper and crayons, dozens of them in neat rows by color. Dmitry Koval stood by the window, jacket off, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms dusted with dark hair. Without the armor of the full tuxedo, he looked less like a myth and more like a man who hadn't slept in several nights. He turned as we entered. His gaze swept over Rodek first, a silent exchange of information passing between them, then landed on me. "Alara Voss," he said. My name sounded different in his mouth. Sharper, more important. "Thank you, Rodek. That will be all." Rodek inclined his head and left, shutting the door softly behind him. I was suddenly very aware that I was alone in a room with the most dangerous man in Harbor City. "Sit, please," Dmitry said, gesturing to a leather chair across from his desk. I sat. My hands twitched toward the strap of my bag, seeking something to hold on to. The stub of red crayon in my pocket felt like an ember against my thigh. "You received my letter," he said. I nodded. "Obviously. Did you read it? I'm here, aren't I?" A faint huff of what might have been amusement escaped him. He moved around the desk with the same controlled grace he'd had at the gala and lowered himself into the chair opposite mine. "For someone whose job is to blend into the background," he observed, "you are remarkably direct." "It's a side effect of working double shifts," I said before I could think better of it. "Polite small talk requires sleep." His mouth twitched again. If I hadn't known better, I would have said he was trying not to smile. "Very well," he said. "We will not waste time." He reached into a drawer and pulled out a sheet of paper. My breath caught when I saw it. The napkin. Not the original, the linen had been replaced with thick, cream-colored stationery, but the drawing was the same. The chandelier, the tables, the tiny dots that represented people, and 3 figures in the center, one tall, one medium, one small. The small one held a red line. "He redrew it when we came home," Dmitry said quietly. "From memory. He would not go to bed until it was finished." I stared at the picture, emotion clogging my throat. "He's really talented," I said, because it was easier than saying "this means more to me than you know." "Yes," Dmitry agreed. "He is." The pride in his voice was subtle but unmistakable. "He does not speak often," Dmitry continued. "When he does, it is usually to correct some mathematical inconsistency or to argue about the placement of his toys. Last night he said a new word. I looked up. "What word?" "Red," Dmitry said. He repeated it many times. "Red, red, red." When I asked why, he showed me this. He tapped the picture. "Then he asked where you went." My heart gave a painful little lurch. "I am not a sentimental man, Miss Voss," Dmitry said. "But my son has not asked for anyone outside this house in a very long time." He leaned forward slightly, forearms braced on his knees, gaze steady. "I am offering you a position," he said. "You would come here 3 evenings a week for 4 hours. You would spend that time with Luca, drawing, playing, doing whatever it is you did to make him look at something other than the floor." I tried to swallow, but my mouth was dry again. "Why me?" I asked. "You could hire, I don't know, a whole team of specialists. Therapists who actually know what they're doing. I already have them, he said flatly. Occupational therapists, speech therapists, behavioral analysts, all very highly recommended, all very expensive. His jaw tightened. None of them have managed, in months of sessions, what you did in 15 minutes with a crayon. I shook my head. That doesn't make me qualified. It makes me lucky. Perhaps, he allowed. But I do not believe in wasting luck. He opened another drawer and slid a folded piece of paper across the desk. I didn't want to touch it. I already knew what it would be. Another number that would make my stomach turn. Your compensation, he said, per week. I stared at it for a full 10 seconds before forcing my hand to move. The number made the 5,000 from earlier look like pocket change. There's a zero too many, I stammered. There is not. 20,000 a month, I whispered. For coloring? For giving my son a reason to look up, Dmitri said. For teaching him that the world is not only sharp edges and loud noises. I pressed my fingertips to my temple. The room felt suddenly too small. I can't take this, I said. It's insane. What is insane? He countered quietly. Is expecting a child like mine to survive in a world like this without help. The way he said child like mine made something deep in my chest ache. I have a daughter, I blurted. Becca. She's 3. She colors on the backs of old receipts and I tell her it's fancy paper so she doesn't feel left out. I took that extra shift at the gala because the power company is about a week away from deciding whether we deserve electricity. I laughed weakly, the sound brittle. So trust me when I say this is insane, I finished. His gaze softened just a fraction. Bring her, he said. I blinked. What? Your daughter, he repeated. Bring her with you in the evenings. There is more than enough space here. And Luca, he hesitated for the first time. He might benefit from the presence of another child who is not afraid of him. The mental image hit me like a punch. Becca's messy curls and Luca's neatly combed hair bent over the same sheet of paper, sharing a box of crayons in a room where no one laughed at them for being kids instead of ornaments. It is your choice, Dmitri said quietly. I do not force employment. Only loyalty once it is given. He leaned back again, giving me the space to breathe. I will give you until tomorrow to decide, he said. Radek will bring you home. I stood on shaky legs, the number on the paper burning into my peripheral vision. At the door, I hesitated and looked back. Why did you send the crayon? I asked. You said Luca wouldn't let go of it. For the first time, Dmitri smiled. It was small, faint, but real. He made me, he said simply. If moments like this, those quiet, unexpected shifts where everything changes, hit you as hard as they hit me living through them, now's a good time to tap like and leave a comment with your favorite part so far. It helps more than you know and keeps these stories coming. Radek drove me home in silence. The city outside the tinted windows looked different now, like I was seeing it from 2 angles at once. The one I'd always known, and the one people like Dmitri used when they decided who lived comfortably and who scraped by in the shadows. Becca was asleep on the couch when I let myself into our apartment, clutching her purple blanket and the stub of a blue crayon she must have filched from my work bag. I knelt beside her and watched her tiny chest rise and fall for a long time, the offer in my pocket whispering loud as a shout. 20,000 a month. A mansion guarded by men with guns. A nonverbal boy who'd drawn me into his world with a red line under a chandelier. I brushed a curl off Becca's forehead. She stirred, muttering something about pancakes, and rolled closer to me. I knew right then that I was already past the point of no return. Because the truth wasn't just that I needed Dmitri Koval's money. The truth was that when Luca had looked at that crayon, I'd seen the same lost, drowning look I'd seen in my own daughter's eyes the first time I'd had to drop her off with a stranger so I could work another shift. And I couldn't unsee it. The next evening, when Radek pulled up to the curb at precisely 4 o'clock, Becca's small hand was firmly wrapped in mine, and my bag was heavier by one well-worn box of crayons. Ready? Radek asked. No, I said honestly. But I'm coming anyway. He nodded once. That is usually how the important things happen. As we drove back toward the estate, Becca pressed her nose to the window, eyes wide at the sight of trees instead of traffic, of houses with actual yards instead of balconies piled with broken furniture. "Are we going to a castle?" she whispered. "Something like that," I said. The Koval mansion looked even more imposing in daylight, all sharp angles against the pale sky. But this time, when the gates opened and the car rolled up the drive, my heart wasn't just pounding with fear. It was pounding with the terrifying possibility of something like hope. Radek led us through a different entrance this time. Not the imposing front doors, but a side corridor that opened into a sunlit room I hadn't seen on my first visit. The walls were painted a soft cream, the floors covered in thick rugs, and every surface seemed designed with one purpose: to be safe for small hands and curious minds. Luca sat at a low table near the window, backlit by afternoon light that turned his carefully combed hair into a halo of gold. He was arranging colored pencils by shade, darkest to lightest, his movements precise and methodical. He didn't look up when we entered, but his shoulders stiffened slightly, awareness without acknowledgement. "Luca," Dmitri said quietly from where he stood near the doorway, hands in his pockets. "Your guest has arrived." Becca's grip on my hand tightened. She pressed herself against my leg, suddenly shy in a way she rarely was. "It's okay," I whispered. "He's nice. He likes colors, just like you." Luca's fingers paused over a particular shade of blue. Slowly, he turned his head, not toward us, but toward the sound of Becca's sneakers squeaking against the hardwood. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Becca, with the fearless logic of a 3-year-old, pulled free of my hand and walked directly to the table. She plopped down on the floor beside Luca's chair and reached into the pocket of her leggings. "I brought purple," she announced, producing a stubby crayon so worn it was barely an inch long. "It's my favorite. What's yours?" Luca blinked at her. Then, with careful deliberation, he picked up the blue pencil he'd been holding and set it on the table between them. "Blue," he said softly, "because it's the color of calm." Becca considered this seriously. "Purple is the color of brave." "That's red," Luca corrected. "No," Becca said firmly. "Red is mad. Purple is brave because it's hard to spell." I bit back a laugh. Dmitri made a sound that might have been a cough or a strangled chuckle. Luca tilted his head, processing this new information with the gravity of a scholar presented with revolutionary data. Then he slid a fresh sheet of paper across the table. "Show me," he said. And just like that, they were drawing together, Becca's wild scribbles filling one half of the page while Luca's careful lines filled the other, their crayons meeting somewhere in the middle in a tangle of purple and blue that somehow made perfect sense. Over the next few weeks, those evening sessions became the rhythm my life had been missing. 3 times a week, Radek would pick us up, always punctual, always polite, always with a small bag of something Becca had mentioned wanting. Juice boxes, goldfish crackers, once an entire box of glitter pens that made Dmitri visibly wince when she opened them. The playroom became our world. I'd bring paper, crayons, paints, and Luca would respond in ways that astonished me. We created color-coding systems for emotions. Yellow for happy, gray for overwhelmed, green for curious. He started using them unprompted, tapping a colored square when words felt too heavy or too sharp. Becca, with her complete lack of self-consciousness, did what no therapist had managed. She simply treated Luca like he was exactly who he was supposed to be. She didn't wait for him to talk. She narrated for both of them. "Now we're drawing dragons," she'd announce. "Luca's dragon is smart and mine breathes glitter." And Luca, who'd been told his whole life that he was the wrong shape for the world, would draw her the most magnificent, anatomically questionable dragon I'd ever seen and label it Becca's brave dragon in precise block letters. I learned his patterns, how he needed warning before transitions, how he'd press his palms flat against the table when sounds got too sharp, how he'd hum, soft, barely audible, when he was happy. And I learned that happiness, for Luca, often looked like stillness, like the moment when a drawing was finished and perfect and didn't need anything else. If watching these 2 kids build their own language is making you feel something, that's exactly what stories are supposed to do. Hit that like button if you're feeling it too. It means we're in this together. Dmitri watched from the doorway sometimes. I'd catch glimpses of him in my peripheral vision, leaning against the frame with his arms crossed, expression unreadable. Once, when Luca laughed, a genuine, startled sound at something Becca said, I saw Dimitri's throat work like he was swallowing something sharp. He never interrupted, never corrected, just observed, cataloging every detail like it was intelligence from a foreign country he desperately wanted to understand. One evening, after Becca had fallen asleep on the playroom couch and Luca was putting away his supplies with the careful ritual that signaled the end of session, Dmitri finally spoke. You're good with him, he said quietly. I looked up from where I was gathering scattered crayon bits. He makes it easy. No, Dmitri said. He does not. But you make it look easy. There is a difference. Something in his voice made me pause. Not quite vulnerability, but close. The kind of tired that sleep couldn't fix. He's a good kid, I said. He just experiences things differently. That doesn't make him broken. Dimitri's jaw tightened. The world believes otherwise. Then the world is wrong, I said simply. Wouldn't be the first time. His eyes met mine, and for a moment, the distance between Mafia boss and waitress collapsed into something uncomfortably human. Thank you, he said, for seeing that. Before I could respond, Luca appeared beside his father, tugging gently on his sleeve. In his other hand, he held a drawing fresh, still smelling of wax and paper. 3 figures again, but this time for tall, medium, small, and smaller. Dmitri took it carefully, studying it with the intensity he probably reserved for contracts worth millions. Is this your family now? He asked Luca softly. Luca nodded once. Then, with the careful enunciation of someone who'd practiced the words, he said, Yes, Alara and Becca stay. My heart did something complicated and painful in my chest. Dimitri's expression shifted, something fierce and protective crossing his features. He crouched down to Luca's level, one large hand coming to rest on his son's shoulder. If that is what you want, he said, then that is what will happen. It should have sounded like a threat. Instead, it sounded like a promise. Everything changed in the 7th week. Luca had been drawing the same image for 3 days straight. A table set with wine glasses, the distinctive curve of a chandelier overhead, and in the corner, always in the corner, a pair of cufflinks rendered in such detail I could see the tiny pattern etched into the gold. That's beautiful, I said, crouching beside him. Is this from somewhere you remember? He nodded but didn't elaborate, already starting another version. Same table, same glasses, same cufflinks. Luca, sweetheart, we've drawn this one a few times now, I said gently. Do you want to try something new? He shook his head, pressing the crayon harder against the paper. I let it go. Fixation was common. Sometimes he'd draw the same thing 20 times before moving on, each iteration slightly different, like he was solving a puzzle I couldn't see. But this felt different, urgent. I gathered the drawings when the session ended, intending to file them away with the others. Radek was waiting by the door as usual, but when I passed him, his eyes snagged on the top page. His entire body went rigid. Where did he see this? Radek asked, voice carefully neutral in a way that made alarm bells shriek in my head. I don't know, I said. He's been drawing it for days. Why? Radek took the stack of papers from my hands, not roughly, but with undeniable authority. I need to show these to Mr. Koval. Radek, what's? Please, he said, take Becca to the car. I will be there shortly. The drive home was quiet, tense. Radek's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, and twice he spoke quietly into his earpiece in rapid Russian that I didn't understand but recognized as urgent. When we pulled up to my building, he turned in his seat. Tomorrow, he said, you will arrive at 4 as usual, but you will not leave the estate until Mr. Koval says you may. Understood. Radek, you're scaring me. His expression softened fractionally. Good. Fear will keep you careful. And right now, Miss Voss, careful is how you stay alive. That night I couldn't sleep. Every sound in the apartment, the creak of pipes, the distant wail of sirens, felt like a countdown to something I couldn't name. The next afternoon, the city itself seemed to confirm my paranoia. On the drive to the estate, we passed 2 police barricades and an ambulance, lights painting the street in red and blue. Rodek's jaw was set, his eyes tracking every vehicle that got too close. When we arrived, the mansion felt different. The guards at the gate were doubled. Men with earpieces stood at intervals along the drive, hands resting casually near concealed weapons. Something had shifted. The carefully maintained veneer of normalcy had cracked, revealing the architecture of violence beneath. Dmitri was waiting in the playroom. Not by the doorway this time, but inside, standing near the window with his back to us. His shoulders were rigid, his hands clasped behind him in a way that made the tendons stand out. "Rodek," he said without turning. "Take the children to the conservatory. Alara stays." Becca looked up at me, uncertain. I forced a smile and squeezed her hand. "Go pick out some flowers with Rodek," I said. "I'll be right there." Rodek scooped her up with surprising gentleness, and Luca, who'd been standing unnaturally still near his father, followed without protest. The door closed behind them with a heavy click. Dmitri turned. His face was carved from stone, all the careful control stripped away to reveal something cold and calculating beneath. "The drawings Luca made," he said. "Do you know what they depict?" I shook my head mutely. "A private meeting," Dmitri continued. "One that took place 6 weeks ago in a secured location. Only 4 people were present. Myself, 2 trusted advisors, and a man I have known for 15 years. He picked up one of Luca's drawings from the table, the one with the cufflinks. "These are his," Dmitri said flatly. "Viktor Sokolov's. He wears them always. A gift from his late wife." He set the drawing down with exaggerated care. "The meeting Luca witnessed," he continued, "was not supposed to include children, but Viktor brought his nephew. I brought Luca. They played in the next room while we discussed business." His voice went even quieter, which somehow made it more terrifying. What Luca saw, and what I did not, was Viktor passing information to a man I would very much like dead. In these drawings, in the specific pattern of glasses and chandeliers, Luca has recorded every detail of a conspiracy I did not know existed until yesterday. My mouth went dry. "You're saying Luca witnessed a betrayal," Dmitri finished. "One that will be acted upon soon. Perhaps at the gala this weekend." The gala. Of course, there was another gala. There was always another gala where the powerful gathered to smile and sharpen knives behind their backs. "What are you going to do?" I asked. His eyes met mine, and what I saw there made my stomach drop. "What I must," he said. "But first, I need you to help me understand what else Luca saw. What other details he remembers that I have not yet noticed." For the next hour, we went through every drawing. I explained the patterns I'd seen, the way certain elements repeated, the subtle differences between iterations. Dmitri asked questions with surgical precision, his mind working through scenarios and probabilities I couldn't begin to follow. When we finished, he was quiet for a long time. "I am going to the gala on Saturday," he said finally. "I must. To show weakness now would invite more predators. But you and the children will remain here under guard." "Okay," I said, relief washing through me. "No," he shook his head. "You misunderstand. I said you will remain here, not that you are dismissed." The meaning crystallized slowly, horribly. "You want us to stay at the estate," I said. "Not just for the evening. For as long as necessary," he confirmed. "Viktor knows I have brought outsiders into my home. If he believes Luca has communicated something to you, he will consider you a liability. And liabilities, Miss Voss, do not survive long in my world." The room felt suddenly airless. "I have a life," I whispered. "An apartment. Bills. I can't just—" "Your apartment has been paid through the year," Dmitri said. "Your possessions will be moved here by morning. You will be compensated for any lost income from your other jobs. You can't just—" "I can," he said, not unkindly. "And I have. Because the alternative is explaining to my son why the woman who taught him to speak in colors is dead." The bluntness of it stole my breath. "This is my fault," I said. "If I hadn't pushed him to draw." "If you had not pushed him to draw," Dmitri interrupted, "I would be walking into an ambush with no warning. Luca saved my life, Ilara, and you gave him the tools to do it." He moved closer, and I saw the exhaustion beneath the control, the fear he refused to name. "Please," he said quietly, "let me protect you. It is the only thing I am truly good at. If this moment just twisted your stomach the way it twisted mine, take a second to leave a comment with your thoughts. Sometimes writing can feel lonely, but knowing you're right there with me in these tense scenes makes all the difference." Saturday arrived too quickly. The estate transformed into a fortress. Guards tripled. Routes planned. Communications encrypted. I watched from the conservatory as Dmitri prepared to walk back into the lion's den, looking every inch the predator they feared. Luca was agitated all day, shredding napkins and pacing in tight circles. No amount of coloring calmed him. He kept drawing the same scene, the ballroom, the chandelier, and now a new element, a red slash across one of the figures. "Luca," I said gently, "can you tell me what this means?" He pressed his lips together, humming that soft note that meant distress. "Danger," he whispered finally. "Red is danger." My blood went cold. I found Dmitri in his study, adjusting his cufflinks with the mechanical precision of a man suiting up for war. "He knows," I said without preamble. "Luca knows something is going to happen tonight." Dmitri's hands stilled. "Show me." I spread the drawings on his desk. The progression was clear once you knew to look for it. The scene evolving, the red spreading, the figure with the distinctive cufflinks moving closer and closer to the tall figure that could only be Dmitri. "This is the moment," I said, pointing to the final drawing. "When Victor makes his move." Luca remembers something specific about the placement, the timing. "The wine service," Dmitri breathed. "Of course. Servers approach from the left during the third course. It would provide cover for." He stopped, jaw clenching. "I am bringing you," he said abruptly. "What?" "No. You said." "I know what I said." He cut me off. "But if something in that room triggers Luca's memory, if there is a detail I miss, I need you there to interpret. You are the only one who understands his language." "Dmitri, I can't." "You can," he said firmly. "And you will, because my son has given me a weapon, and you are the only one who knows how to use it." The Grand Meridian Ballroom looked exactly as it had months ago when this all started. Crystal chandeliers, designer gowns, the suffocating smell of wealth and lies. But this time I wasn't invisible. I was on Dmitri's arm, wearing a dress that probably cost more than my old car. Every eye in the room tracking our entrance with barely concealed shock. Luca walked between us, small and perfect in his cobalt suit, one hand gripping mine with surprising strength. "Stay close," Dmitri murmured. "When I give the signal, Radek will take you and Luca to the car." "What signal?" I asked. His smile was cold. "You will know." The evening crawled forward with agonizing slowness. Conversations, handshakes, the careful dance of predators pretending to be civilized. I kept my eyes on Luca, watching for any sign of recognition. He was tense but controlled, occasionally pointing to elements in the room and whispering their colors to himself like an incantation. Then Viktor Sokolov entered. Tall, silver-haired, distinguished in the way only old money and older violence could achieve. His cufflinks caught the light gold, ornate, unmistakable. Luca's hand went rigid in mine. "Red," he whispered. "Red, red, red." "I see him," I said quietly. "It's okay. We see him." Victor moved through the crowd with practiced ease, accepting greetings, working his way steadily toward where Dmitri stood speaking with a senator. My heart hammered. I touched Dmitri's elbow, the lightest pressure. He glanced down, saw my face, followed my gaze to Victor. "Third course," I whispered. Understanding flashed in his eyes. The dinner service began. Appetizers, small talk, the careful choreography of servers moving between tables with military precision. Victor positioned himself 2 seats away from Dmitri, perfectly placed, perfectly timed. The second course came and went. Then the third. Servers approached from the left, just as Luca had drawn. Wine glasses were refilled, and Victor's hand moved toward his jacket in a motion so casual it would have been invisible if I hadn't been watching for it. "Now," I said. Dmitri moved faster than I'd ever seen him move, his hand clamping around Victor's wrist before it could reach whatever was hidden in that jacket. "I would not," Dmitri said conversationally, his voice carrying despite the din. "Do that if I were you." The ballroom went silent. Victor's face drained of color. "Dmitri, I don't know what." "My son," Dmitri said, "has an exceptional memory and a new way of communicating. Would you like to see?" He gestured, and Radek stepped forward, pulling the drawings from inside his jacket and spreading them on the table. Victor stared at the images, his cufflinks, his positioning, the details of the meeting he thought no one had witnessed, and the fight drained out of him all at once. "How?" he breathed. "Crayons," Dmitri said simply. Then the ballroom exploded into chaos. Guards appeared from nowhere. Victor's men tried to move but found themselves already surrounded. There were shouts, the metallic click of safeties being released, and somewhere in the background, a woman screamed. Radek had Luca and me behind him instantly, his body a wall between us and the violence unfurling. "Do not look," he said firmly. "Come." We were already moving, being herded toward the exit through corridors suddenly filled with security. When I heard it, a single gunshot, sharp and final, muffled by the closed ballroom doors. By the time we reached the car, Luca was shaking, tears streaming silently down his face. I pulled him into my lap, wrapping myself around him like I could shield him from the whole brutal world. "Colors," I whispered. "Tell me the colors, Luca. Focus on the colors." "Gray," he choked out. "Gray, gray, gray." "That's right," I said. "Gray for overwhelmed." "That's exactly right. What color comes next? What color do we need?" His breath hitched. "Blue." "Yes, blue for calm. Can you find blue?" He pressed his face against my shoulder and pointed shakily at the night sky visible through the window, where stars were just beginning to appear. "Blue," he repeated. "That's right, sweetheart," I said, rocking him gently. "That's exactly right." Becca, who'd been waiting at the estate with a guard, flew into my arms the moment we walked through the door. I held both children, one on each side, and tried very hard not to think about the ballroom, about Victor, about the sound of that gunshot. Dmitri returned 2 hours later, jacket gone, sleeves rolled up, a spot of something dark on his collar that I absolutely was not going to identify. He looked at the three of us curled together on the conservatory couch, me, Becca, and Luca all tangled in blankets, and his expression cracked. "Is he?" Dmitri started. "He's okay," I said quietly, shaken, but okay. Dmitri crossed the room in 3 strides and dropped to his knees in front of the couch, bringing himself level with Luca. "Cynic," he said hoarsely. "I am so sorry. You should never have seen." "Red," Luca interrupted, his voice small but clear. "Red means danger, but you stopped it." The red stopped. Dimitri's throat worked. "Yes, it stopped. Because of the crayons?" "Because of you," Dmitri corrected. "You warned me. You saved my life." Luca processed this silently, then reached out and placed one small hand on his father's cheek, a gesture so tender and unexpected that Dmitri actually flinched. "You're safe now," Luca said. "We're all safe." "Yes," Dmitri agreed roughly. "We are." He looked up at me then, eyes red-rimmed and fierce. "Thank you," he said. "If you had not understood, if you had not been there." "But I interrupted. "We were." He nodded slowly, then reached out and covered my hand with his own. His palm was warm and calloused and trembling very slightly. "You are family now," he said. "Not a question, a declaration. You and Becca, for as long as you will have us." I thought about my tiny apartment, about the double shifts and the overdue notices and the constant fear, about the life I'd lived where being invisible felt like survival. Then I looked at Luca, whose drawings had just rewritten the power structure of Harbor City's underworld. At Becca, who'd taught him that bravery was purple. At Dimitri, who'd built an empire on violence but was currently kneeling on the floor of a conservatory trying very hard not to cry. Okay, I said. Yes, okay. Later, after the children were asleep and the estate had settled into the quiet hum of nighttime security protocols, I found Luca's latest drawing on the playroom table. 4 figures under a chandelier just like before, but this time they were holding hands in a circle. And in the center, in careful block letters, were 2 words, my family. I picked it up carefully, this crayon and paper treaty that had somehow become my life, and carried it to my new room. I placed it on the nightstand where I could see it when I woke up. A reminder that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is care about someone the world has decided doesn't matter. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, they care back just as fiercely. In the weeks that followed, the city buzzed with rumors about what had happened at the gala. Viktor Sokolov's name disappeared from the social pages. His associates went quiet or moved away, and Dmitry Koval, already feared, became something closer to myth. But in the conservatory of his cliffside mansion, none of that mattered. What mattered was that Becca taught Luca the word sparkle, that he taught her the proper names for all 47 colors in their new crayon set, that Dmitry started joining our sessions, sitting quietly in the corner and occasionally offering his own terrible attempts at stick figures that made Luca laugh, that slowly, carefully, we built something that looked like happiness from the unlikeliest materials. Wax and paper and the stubborn refusal to believe that broken things couldn't be beautiful. Radek was assigned permanently to our security detail, which mostly meant he drove us to parks and made sure Becca didn't eat things she found on the ground. He pretended to be stoic about it, but I caught him teaching her chess notation one afternoon, his scarred face softening when she called him Uncle Rad. And one evening, about 3 months after the gala, Luca climbed into my lap with a drawing he'd been working on in secret, for figures again. But this time, one of them was wearing a crown made of purple crayon. That's Becca, he explained seriously. Because she's brave. And who's this? I asked, pointing to the medium figure. You, he said. You get red. Because you're the one who stops danger. And these 2. Dad, he said, pointing to the tall figure. Then to the small one beside it. Me. What colors do you get? He smiled, a real, full smile that crinkled his eyes. Blue and gold, he said. Because we're calm and precious. I hugged him tight, feeling Dimitri's hand settle warm and steady on my shoulder. Yeah, I said, voice rough. You really are. Later that night, Dimitri found me on the terrace overlooking the bay, watching lights shimmer on the water. He called me Dad, Dimitri said quietly. Not father, Dad. I heard, I said. That is because of you. No, I corrected. That's because he feels safe enough to say it. That's all you. Dimitri moved to stand beside me, close enough that our shoulders nearly touched. I have done terrible things, he said after a moment. Things I can never undo or apologize for. Things that would horrify you if you knew the details. I know, I said. And yet you stay. I turned to look at him. This complicated, dangerous, tender man who dismantled his empire's hierarchy because his son liked crayons. I stay because of who you are when you're with him, I said. Because I've seen you rebuild your entire schedule around color-coding games. Because you learned the proper names for 30 different shades of blue just so you could talk to your son in his language. I paused, gathering courage. And because when I look at you, I don't see the monster everyone else sees. I see someone who loves so fiercely it remade the world. His breath caught. Elara. I'm not done, I said. I also stay because Becca has never been this happy. Because for the first time in her life, she's not worried about whether we can afford dinner. Because she has a friend who thinks her purple brave theory is valid academic research. And because, he prompted, turning to face me fully. Because I think I'm falling in love with your family, I said. All of it. The crayon-filled playroom and the armed guards and the 5-year-old who speaks in colors. All of it. Dimitri's hand came up to cup my face, thumb brushing my cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "Just my family?" he asked. "Well," I said, heart hammering, "you're kind of included in that package." He smiled. Not the cold, calculated smile of the Mafia boss, but something warm and real and just for me. "Good," he said, "because you have become essential Elara Voss. To him, to this house, to me." When he kissed me, it tasted like possibility, like second chances and crayon wax and something brave enough to be called hope. Inside, through the glass doors, I could see Luca and Becca crashed out on the playroom couch, covered in blankets and clutching their respective comfort objects. Roddick stood guard by the door, pretending not to smile. It wasn't the life I'd planned. It wasn't even the life I'd thought possible. But as Dimitri's arms wrapped around me and the city lights sparkled below us like a promise, I realized something important. Sometimes the best stories start with the smallest gestures. Sometimes all it takes is a crayon, a moment of courage, and the willingness to see someone for who they really are beneath the labels the world has given them. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, that crayon-bright courage builds something unbreakable. Family, a future, a home. Thank you for listening to this story. Thank you for staying with Elara and Luca and Dimitri through every twist and every tender moment. Stories like these only matter when they're shared, and I'm grateful you chose to spend this time here with me. Until the next story finds us, take care, and maybe keep a crayon close just in case.